Welcome back to Dark Case Diaries, where depths are shared. Kindly view, and subscribe. Let's get into the busyness of the day. Unarmed, uniformed, arrested. What they did to this Army general was unforgivable. March 3rd, 2025, Washington, D.C., 7:13 p.m. The clatter of rain echoed on the windows of the Pentagon South Wing, a quiet hum behind the focused conversations and polished shoes of military brass. Lieutenant General Langston J. Cade stood before the mirror in his office, adjusting the last brass button on his classy uniform. His ribbons, 37 of them, gleamed under the light. 3 bronze stars, a Purple Heart, Legion of Merit, but none of them weighed more than a folded flag on the desk behind him, his father's. Tonight wasn't about ceremony or war stories. It was about bridging a legacy. General Cade was preparing for a community event at Howard University, an evening meant to inspire young black ROTC cadets. His speech was simple. Wear the uniform, but never forget the skin you're in. As he closed the door to his office and stepped into the rain-slick city night, he had no idea that within 90 minutes, he'd be lying face down on the pavement, handcuffed, bleeding, and humiliated in full uniform by officers who never asked for his name. Langston Cade was born in Macon, Georgia, in 1972, back when the echoes of segregation still lingered in the red clay and dusty streets. His mother, Diana, was a local school principal. His father, Curtis, a Vietnam veteran who returned home with one arm and a fierce love for discipline. Langston was raised with 2 constants: silence in church and pride in service. He loved the sound of creaking floorboards in his grandparent home, the way his father polished his shoes every Sunday, and a black and white photo of his grandfather in a Buffalo Soldier's uniform from World War II. The Cade family didn't speak of injustice often. They lived it. Langston's first lesson in racism wasn't in books. It was watching his father get passed over for a county job he was more than qualified for twice. It wasn't until years later he understood why. By age 14, Langston memorized the Army Code of Conduct, and every battlefield rank from private to general. But he also memorized the advice from his father. Son, wear the uniform with pride, but always know it won't always protect you. Langston didn't just join the Army. He conquered it, graduating from West Point with honors, then surviving deployments in Bosnia, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Cade earned a reputation as a soldier's general, one who led from the front, never from behind a desk. He survived an IED explosion in Fallujah that left shrapnel in his left leg and memory gaps in his mind. But he returned to service months later, against medical advice. By the time he was 45, Cade was among the highest-ranking black officers in the U.S. Army. Quiet, sharp, measured, he walked with an unshakable calm. Yet under that uniform was a man who still crossed the street at night when police drove by, just in case. He believed in America, but he also knew its blind spots. It happened in Southeast D.C. Langston's car, a black Lincoln Navigator with government tags, had a tire blowout near a gas station, known more for corner boys than clean restrooms. Wearing his uniform and cover, he stepped out to check the damage. A patrol cruiser drove by, then reversed, then parked. 2 white officers emerged, hands already on holsters. No siren, no hello, just questions barked like accusations. Whose car is this? What are you doing in this area? Take your hands out of your pockets. Now! Langston raised his ID badge. I'm Lieutenant General Cade, United States Army. I'm heading to... The words were cut short by a sudden grab, a twist, a shove of the hood. His metal scratched against the cold steel. His ribbon snapped. His cover hit the wet ground. In less than 60 seconds, a 3-star general lay face down in the street, knees in his back, hands zip-tied. He's got something in his pocket. It's a challenge coin, the other officer yelled. It's Army. Silence. Then one of them finally saw it, his name badge now tilted sideways, Lieutenant General Cade. The gas station clerk, who had seen the entire arrest unfold, had started recording on his phone just seconds before the takedown. The grainy footage showed Langston on the ground, in full military uniform, hands zip-tied, with one officer still pressing a knee into his spine. You could hear his calm, clipped words through the wind and sirens. I am Lieutenant General Langston Cade. I serve this country. I am not resisting. The video wasn't dramatic in length, only 41 seconds, but it was devastating in context. The stripes on his shoulder were unmistakable. His uniform bore the flag of the country he bled for, yet none of it had mattered. By midnight, the video was posted on Twitter with the caption, "Unarmed, uniformed, arrested. What they did to this Army general was unforgivable." By morning, it had 2.8 million views. Back in his home, Langston sat at the kitchen table, still in his torn uniform, his face bruised and lips split. He had refused medical treatment at the scene. The military police had been called to the station. Once his identity was verified, the D.C. officers tried to backtrack, but the video had already ignited a national conversation. The Pentagon called an emergency briefing, but the generals in that room weren't there to comfort him. They were there to protect the image of the institution. One asked if he had resisted. Another wondered why he was in that part of town. Langston sat in silence. He'd seen enemies in war zones treat him with more respect than what he got in his own city. Only one voice in the room spoke up for him, General Teresa Vaughn, Chief of Staff of the Army. A man gave 30 years of his life to this nation, and your first instinct is to investigate him. Amara Cade was 24, and in her third year of law school, when she saw the video on Instagram, she recognized her father's walk instantly. The world now saw what she had always feared. She didn't see a general on the ground. She saw Dad. She flew from Atlanta to D.C. the next morning, storming into her childhood home like a whirlwind. "Dad, why didn't you fight back?" "Because I knew if I did, they might shoot me." Amara, furious, called reporters, friends, and civil rights organizations, and posted her own video, a side-by-side comparison of her father's accolades and the arrest footage. Her voice cracked as she said, "You can serve this country, lead battalions, bleed on foreign soil, and still, all they see is a black man." Washington's mayor was forced to address the footage by day 3. In a press conference packed with press and protesters, she stood stiffly at the podium. "We are aware of the incident involving Lieutenant General Langston Cade. An internal affairs investigation has been opened. It wasn't enough." Protests surged outside the D.C. Police Department. Signs read, "Uniformed is not equal to safe." "Honor our heroes. Stop humiliating them." How many more generals? The officers were placed on paid administrative leave. Langston stayed silent. Until now, day 5, Langston Cade appeared on 60 Minutes. He wore a suit, not his uniform. His hands were still bruised, but his voice, measured, composed, cut deeper than any outrage. "I've fought enemies overseas who treated me with more humanity than I received from officers sworn to protect their own." The interviewer leaned in. "Why didn't you tell them who you were sooner?" Langston sighed. "Because I wanted to see how far they would go, and because I needed America to see it too." Under public pressure, the Pentagon issued a formal statement. "Lieutenant General Langston Cade's service is beyond reproach. We are disheartened by the events of March 3rd and commit to supporting our officer fully." But Langston didn't want statements. He wanted policy. He demanded a meeting with the Secretary of Defense. And he got one. There, he proposed a Cade protocol, a mandatory civilian military sensitivity training program for all local and federal law enforcement. He wanted not just change, but permanent safeguards for every person in uniform and every black citizen who was not. The proposal Langston drafted, dubbed the Cade Protocol, spread through Washington like wildfire. It called for mandatory cross-training between military and civilian police departments, implicit bias education targeting the treatment of black men in uniform, federal tracking of civilian incidents involving service members, real consequences for officers who violate military rights. Many in the defense community supported it, but law enforcement unions across the country pushed back hard. They claimed the bill was anti-police. Langston stood firm. This isn't about being anti-police. It's about being pro-accountability, pro-respect, pro-human dignity. As debates raged in Congress and the media, one story emerged that changed everything. 6 days after the original arrest, a second angle surfaced from a nearby security camera. This footage didn't have audio, but it didn't need it. It showed Langston calmly walking out of the gas station, bag in hand. 2 officers rushed him before he could reach his car. They shoved him. He raised his hands. He pointed to his ID. One officer looked at it, then threw it aside. That moment, when they tossed aside his military ID, became a symbol. It was more than disrespect. It was dehumanization. Cable news replayed the clip on a loop. Social media exploded. Hashtag ID Throne trended for 48 hours. Veterans, black, white, brown, marched together on the Pentagon steps. Thousands held up their military IDs, then dropped them to the ground in unison. Their signs read, "If a 3-star general isn't safe, who is? America, we kept our promise. Why can't you?" No ID should be thrown aside. Langston didn't attend the protest, but he watched from his window, tears in his eyes. For the first time, he wasn't alone. A grand jury indicted both officers involved in the arrest, one for excessive force, the other for civil rights violations. In court, the officers looked stiff, rehearsed. Langston took the stand in full dress uniform. He didn't speak with rage. He didn't lash out. He simply told the truth. "I am not here today as a general. I am here as a man who served his country. And I'm asking you to consider, if this could happen to me, what happened to those with no rank, no medals, no camera watching?" The courtroom was silent. Both officers were found guilty. A month after the verdict, Langston received a visitor at his home. It was Officer Karen Bell, the rookie cop who had remained in the background that day, visibly shaken, but silent. She stood on his porch with tears in her eyes. "I wanted to say, I'm sorry. I should have spoken up. I froze, but I knew it was wrong." Langston nodded slowly. He didn't absolve her, but he didn't close the door either. Then don't freeze again. Use your badge to protect, not just serve. She left with a new mission and a changed heart. Congress passed a trimmed-down version of the Cade Protocol 3 months later. It wasn't everything Langston proposed, but it was a start. The General Cade Act required police departments to report civilian interactions with active-duty military, sensitivity training about ranks and rights, creation of a federal hotline for uniformed personnel facing police misconduct. It was the first time in U.S. history such a bill had been passed in response to the mistreatment of a black military officer. The White House invited Langston to receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He stood beside civil rights heroes, astronauts, poets. The president called him a man of courage on the battlefield, and off it, a protector of democracy, even when it failed to protect him. Langston stood at the podium. "I didn't ask to become a symbol. I just wanted to buy gas and go home." Laughter, then silence. "But if my pain helps build a better road for those come behind me, then I'll wear that burden with pride." Langston retired from the military later that year, not out of defeat, but because his war had changed fronts. He began speaking at universities, police academies, and community centers. He told his story not as a warning, but as a call to do better. His daughter Amara opened a nonprofit in his name, the Cade Institute for Justice, aimed at bridging gaps between law enforcement and the communities they serve. His story became a documentary, then a textbook case, then, finally, a lesson America began to learn. 2 years later, Langston Cade was back on the same base where he had once trained new recruits. But this time, he wasn't in uniform. He was delivering a keynote address to an auditorium of future officers. His voice was deeper now, slower, but every word carried weight. Respect isn't earned by stars on your shoulder. It's earned by how you treat people when no one is watching. And if you wear this uniform, you are never invisible, but you are always a representative of justice, of dignity, of what this country says it stands for. Cadets stood to applaud. Some wiped away tears. Langston looked out to sea of young faces, black, white, Latino, Asian, Native, each one wearing a uniform he'd nearly bled for and still loved. He realized then the uniform hadn't failed him. People had, and people could change. Langston never returned to combat, but he marched with Gold Star families. with mothers of the fallen, with wrongly convicted men released after decades, with children holding cardboard signs too big for their hands. Wherever justice had been denied, he showed up. His presence alone carried weight, reminding the world that power didn't always come with rage. Sometimes it came with calm, with discipline, with honor. He lived to see the day military ID cards were added to federal civil rights protections, an idea sparked by the moment his was thrown to the ground. And in one final act of grace, he returned to that same gas station where it all began. It had been renamed Cade Corner. A small plaque hung near pump number 3, in honor of General Langston Cade, unarmed, uniformed, unbreakable. Langston Cade died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 76, surrounded by his family. He left behind a wife who called him her hero, a daughter who carried his mission forward, and a nation that, for once, didn't forget his name. He was not just a statistic, not just a headline. He was a man who wore his scars like medals and walked forward when others turned away. And long after his heart stopped beating, the country he loved kept marching, just a little closer toward the justice he dreamed of.